So just got done watching the replay of the fight between Badou Jack and James DeGale. And man, what a great fight. Obviously, I mean, it's still very early in the year, but that's the fight of the year so far. Goes without saying. And also, the fight started kind of slow, kind of technical. I don't want to use the word slow, but it started slower paced, more technical, and it progressed throughout the rounds. And the crescendo was at the very end. How many really, really good fights do you see where the peak of the fight is at the very end, leaving you wanting more? That's what really made it a great fight for me. And I think that 12th round was, to me, the best round of the fight. And that's gonna hold up as a round of the year candidate. I think that there's gonna be much better fights than this one throughout this year. I think 2017 is going to be a really good year in boxing. So I don't know if this will end up being a top 10 fight of the year. It could. It very well could. But that round, that 12th round, that's going to hold up as one of the better rounds of the year. Want to talk about some things here. I got some notes here I wanted to talk about real quick about this fight, okay? The score, obviously, majority draw. So what happens is each guy came in with a title. They keep their title. Ring Magazine was going to name a champion, as this was the number one, number two in the division. Since it's a draw, there's still no champion. So super middleweight as a division is still a blown up division. It's wide open. There's still no number one guy there. Badou Jack says he wants to go up to 175 pounds. Let me just say this. I didn't see anything in this fight that tells me that either of these guys could really, really seriously contend with Sergey Kovalev or Andre Ward. Of course, they'd be competitive, but they'd lose those fights, clearly. I think maybe they could contend with Adonis Stevenson and some of the other top guys at 175, but they're not at that level of Sergey Kovalev or even Andre Ward at this point. I didn't see anything like that. And I'll talk specifically about each fighter in a second, but I think Jack, it would behoove him to stay at 168 for one more fight and do a rematch, because I think the rematch between these two would do even better business. We don't know what the TV rating was for this fight. Obviously, I'm recording this Sunday morning right after the fight. We'll find out this week, but I would imagine it probably did a pretty good rating. The NFL playoffs are going on right now, and there were two games Saturday, but that second game ended, I want to say, halfway through the main event. So I think that the ratings for this card probably progressively got better. And by the championship rounds, that's obviously where they probably did their peak rating. And it timed out perfectly. So it'll be interesting to see what the rating was. There was a good crowd there at Barclays. James DeGale wants the rematch over in England. I think if they want to do it that way, they're going to have to shell out more money for Badou Jack's side. And that's understandable, right? Because his side feels they won the fight. Obviously, DeGale's side feels they won the fight. But to put that fight over in London, that's James DeGale's backyard. So I think they'd have to pay Badou Jack some more money, and I think it'd be worth it for them. And I think over there, you do a massive crowd. They could possibly do this rematch in Wembley and do a big, big crowd over there. It could be a lot like the Froch Groves rematch. Maybe not quite that big of a crowd, but that type of atmosphere. I really do think that this could be a big one. The fight itself, the way I scored it, here's the thing. I'm just looking at my scorecard here. The night of the fight, I gave it to DeGale by a couple points. I just watched it again. I gave it to Jack by a couple points. I thought that there were 4 close swing rounds. I thought the 3rd and the 5th and the 9th and the 10th, the 9th and the 10th weren't as close as the 3rd and the 5th, but they were still close competitive rounds. And those 4 rounds, if you give all 4 of those rounds to Jack, he wins the fight. If you give all 4 of them to DeGale, he wins the fight. If you split them down the middle, then Jack barely wins the fight on my card. So that's the thing. Let's say if you give 2 of those rounds to Jack, then he comes out ahead, I think, by a point or 2 on my card. So you have to be very, very favorable in those close rounds to James DeGale to have him winning this fight, or even to have it a draw, in my opinion. Jack may have done just enough to squeeze it out. But in this fight, I'm cool with the draw. Now, talking about the fighters themselves, James DeGale, I think he wastes a lot of movement, man. I think he has great footwork. He moves around very, very well on the outside. He can dart in from the outside and land some shots. They're slapping kind of punches, but he catches guys from odd angles and snaps their head. But he misses a lot of punches, just flat out. I'm not even talking about they're blocked, right? Jack has that high guard, and a lot of them were hitting his arms and stuff. But DeGale can just flail from outside and just wildly miss with hooks. And he did that a lot in this fight. And that not only looks bad for judges and fans, just the impression he gives, but it wastes a lot of energy. I think he wastes a lot of movement. I think sometimes he would do better for himself to stay in the pocket more and make slower side steps. It's good to step side to side. It's good to turn. But he does these wide turns, these wide side steps. Cut that shit in half. Narrow the angles a little bit. Still give your angles. Still turn your man. But do it tighter. You don't waste as much energy. And then those flailing punches from the outside, sometimes they look good and score. Sometimes they miss. It's 50-50 really from what I saw in this fight. He expends so much energy. And because of that, he doesn't punch consistently. There isn't that consistent jab. And I think if he kept things tighter and just kept a jab going more, I think he'd get the benefit of the doubt more in close rounds. And he'd control fights more comfortably. Because there are moments when DeGale uses that movement very well and keeps his man off balance, but then he tires. And his man can cut the ring off and get on him and land shots. And that's what Badou-Jack did. Now for Badou-Jack, he does some good work. He stalks. He's very calculated about the way he does it. He covers up very well. I think he absorbs a lot of punches. He doesn't really roll his shots. He just blocks them. DeGale tends to roll with a lot of punches. And even if they land, they're glancing the way the punches land. For Jack, he blocks a lot of the shots. He's kind of just comes straight forward, just keeps charging at you. At times, he cuts the ring off very well. At times, he followed DeGale around in this fight. It was kind of 50-50 on his part with that. He could do a little bit better of a job cutting off the ring. But when he did cut off the ring, he landed some nice body shots. He landed some nice uppercuts, some nice counter punches. But again, even with Badou-Jack, it just wasn't a consistent flow of punches. It was in spurts. I thought Jack was more consistent with his punching, at least his quality punches, than DeGale. I thought DeGale was more consistent just with volume, but the punches weren't necessarily of as good of quality as Jack. But these two guys, neither one of them really showed that they were above the other, and neither one truly showed that they're the champion of the super middleweight division. Now, here's another question. Will James DeGale be the same after this fight? Because I thought progressively, I thought he built up an early lead. I don't think he dominated the first half of the fight, but I thought he was ahead going into the middle rounds. If you gave him those early swing rounds, I thought he was ahead. But man, he started to take an ass whooping. I want to say it was the 8th round maybe where Jack really put it on him. But that 11th and especially the 12th round, he took an ass whooping. Of course, he got his tooth knocked out. He spit out his mouthpiece, or was knocked out at least, I think 4 times. I counted 4 times. And Arthur McCanty, the ref, who showed a hell of a chin, by the way, I think it was the end of the 5th round where he took a shot from, I think it was from Badou-Jack. And he could tell he was really pissed off. He was holding his eye, but man, he took a good shot. He kept on trucking, right? He comes from a boxing family. A lot of people don't know that about the McCantys. But Arthur McCanty could have taken a point from James DeGale at some point. In fact, I think at the end of the 10th round, James DeGale's cornerman ran out and grabbed the mouthpiece off the canvas while McCanty was turned the other way and didn't see it. If McCanty had seen that, because he had warned, like, hey, stop spitting out the damn mouthpiece, he could have possibly took a point, and that would have changed the history of this fight, obviously. It would have been a win for Badou-Jack. But spitting out the mouthpiece multiple times is never a good look, and I know that James DeGale lost a tooth. His gum was busted up. It was bleeding. It was swollen. It had to be uncomfortable to keep that mouthpiece in, and maybe that was part of it. But it also shows a fighter is fatigued and a fighter is taking an ass whooping. When the mouthpiece starts coming out repeatedly in a fight like that, it shows that he's being tuned up a little bit and worn down. He showed tremendous heart fighting back. And even in the 12th round, he was taking an ass whooping. He was doling out some punches down to the final bell. So James DeGale's heart can never be questioned after this. But I don't know if he's going to look the same after this fight, man. This might have been one of those fights where he took some shots that accumulative just progressively wore him down a little bit. And I just something to keep an eye on. Is he ever going to look the same after this, especially in a rematch? You know, if there is a rematch, can Badou-Jack start faster? Because he didn't start very fast in this fight. Can he start faster? And will it look like the 13th round of the first fight? Or will it be a replay of the first fight? I don't know, man. All these questions to be answered, hopefully, if they do a rematch. One thing, Badou-Jack's rounds that he won more decisively than the rounds that James DeGale won. I thought that was evident throughout. And that brings me to the subject of the comparison some people on social media are making between this fight and the Sergey Kovalev-Andre Ward fight. I know, beating a dead horse, right? Mike, that fight was so last year. Shut up. It was only a few months ago. There are some similarities, obviously. One guy was put down early and came back and finished fairly strong in the fight. But those two fights are completely different. Badou-Jack was knocked down early in this fight off, I think it was straight left from DeGale, but it was more of a flash knockdown. He was off balance. He was his balance was back. He wasn't on the front foot. He was leaning back and just got flash knocked down. He wasn't hurt. He wasn't tuned up in the first couple rounds of this fight like Andre Ward was against Sergey Kovalev. He wasn't dominated in the first half of the fight. There were a few swing rounds, again, that could have gone Badou-Jack's way. It was competitive early on, even in the round where he got put down. So to me, the comparisons don't make any sense. And then Badou-Jack not only came back in the fight, but dropped James DeGale. And look at their faces. Badou-Jack had some wear and tear in his face, but James DeGale looked like the Fly, right? He looked like that movie with Jeff Goldblum from the 80s. A lot of you guys out there are probably too young to even remember that one. I was just a kid myself. But the Fly, he looked grotesque. He had stuff going on all over his face. He looked bad. You compare this to Sergey Kovalev and Andre Ward. Andre Ward's the one who looked beat up after that fight. Kovalev looked like he just went out for a run. Andre Ward did not come back the same way Badou-Jack came back. So for some of you out there trying to compare this fight, especially those of you who try to justify Andre Ward getting the decision over Sergey Kovalev, you're not helping your case. In fact, you're just showing why guys like me and 3/4 of the media and fans feel that Sergey Kovalev clearly won that fight against Andre Ward. So comparing those two fights, not a good idea if you're on Andre Ward's side in that fight. But let's get back to Jack and DeGale. You got to do a rematch, okay? I don't care if it's in the U.S. I don't care if it's in London. Obviously, it's a bigger event over in London. I think it does a bigger crowd, and I think that it would be a great rating here in America on Showtime. It'd be back on Showtime, especially if they put a nice co-feature with it. Speaking of the co-feature in this fight, where Gervonta Davis scores maybe a mild upset win over Jose Pedraza. My prediction, you guys who watched the Neutral Corner, you saw that I thought Davis was going to win a controversial decision. I thought that Pedraza was going to use his height and box intelligently and win some close rounds and do just enough to win a decision, but get robbed. That's what I thought was going to happen here. But instead, he fought the worst possible game plan. I don't know what the hell he was thinking. He switched up and fought southpaw. He kept a high guard and tried to crouch inside on Davis, a shorter, more compact guy with better hand speed and better power. That's probably the worst thing you could do. In the very early stages of that fight, when Pedraza fought righty, it stayed on the outside and stayed behind a jab. I thought the fight looked kind of even. I thought Pedraza was even having his moments in winning in spots. But once he switched up southpaw, Davis saw everything coming, and once he got crouched down and inside on Davis, that just opened up uppercuts for the shorter guy. Then anytime Pedraza's guard came from here to here, once he got up front with it, Davis started just shooting around with hooks. So it was uppercuts up the middle, it was hooks around the sides, and then he back Pedraza off him, and then the straight shots started to come. And then it turned into him just tuning the guy up. 6th, 7th round were brutal for Pedraza, and I don't think he's ever going to look the same after this. So now, look, Davis has a title, but I think this was his 18th professional fight, 17th, I think it was his 18th professional fight. He's still a prospect. Some of you out there saying that he's going to duck Vasyl Lomachenko. Guys, he's not ready for that. He's not even ready for some of the second-tier fighters in that division. Like, even an Orlando Salido, I think, would give him problems at this point just because of the veteran craft and everything else. Give him time to develop. Because of the landscape of boxing and the titles everywhere, a lot of these young guys who are really just still prospects have titles right now. He's just a prospect. Give him time to develop. But I think that once he figures it out, man, he's going to be pretty damn good. That's the way I see it. Let me know what you guys think. We got to see a rematch between DeGale and Jack. Great fight.